Welcome to the Business Leaders Legacy Podcast, the show where we go behind the scenes of business leaders to uncover their vision, strategies, and challenges they face along the way. My name is Chris Bruner. I'm the CEO of Simple AI Solutions and the host of today's podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to have Dr. Darren Lawson, owner of Paradox Communication Consulting. Darren is a 36-year veteran of the consulting world, has a PhD in expert organizational and interpersonal communication, and the founder of a firm that helps organizations across manufacturing, healthcare, logistics, and education turn disconnected teams and unclear messaging into aligned, high performing cultures. And so, Darren, thank you for being here. I'm excited to jump into your story. Can you please share with our listeners a little bit about you, your journey, and what Paradox Consulting does?
Sure, Chris. It's great to be with you here today. My journey really started 36 years ago, as you said, and it was kind of centered around one thing, and that was helping communication in organizations, helping people communicate in better ways to increase the clarity of what they were saying, to increase trust, and better align employees with what the organization is trying to do. So during this time, I was also in higher education as a dean and professor, and I loved that work. Don't get me wrong, but what I found was that while I was shaping leaders and building programs and directing teams within the organization, over time I realized that the communication challenges that I was facing inside my organization of higher education were the same ones that organizations were facing
Mhm.
outside, and they were wrestling with. So Paradox kind of grew out of that realization. Today, I work with organizations, as you said, across manufacturing, healthcare, logistics, education, and I diagnose where communication is breaking down. In some ways, I see myself as a doctor coming in to help the patient understand where they're having problems in the organizational body. And then I try to help them rebuild that. I think my work is part audit, it's part organizational tuning, it's part coaching. But at its center, we exist to help leaders communicate so that they can reduce that friction and improve performance. So that's kind of what we're all about.
Yeah, no, that is really cool. I really like how you said like a doctor, like coming in,
Yeah.
diagnosing and helping figure out how to solve and
Yeah.
move forward in the best way. And so that
That's
is
right.
really cool. It really is interesting just to hear how like a lot of the different parts of your career has come together
Mhm.
to, you
Mhm.
know, help this thing, not just get started, but to like thrive
Yeah.
and to do really well. And so that is really awesome. You definitely have a very wide range in your career. And I'm wondering, what keeps that like, drawing you back to the communication as like,
Mhm.
that is what like matters most, right? Like what is like the why behind why you help these
Yeah.
companies?
Well, what I found, you mentioned that, I sometimes direct. I was involved with fine arts, so whether I'm directing a show or leading, in my case, an academic school within the university, I taught graduate students, but I was also doing consulting on the side. It's always about communication. It always comes back. That's the thread that runs through everything, and I'm a big one on structure and people. So communication is kind of an invisible structure that every organization is part of. When it's strong, everything is moving forward, it's accelerating, but when it's weak, everything's dragging and things are just not working. So that's really why I keep coming back to communication, because it's the same no matter what industry you're in.
Yeah, and it is so important, right? I feel like
Yes,
like organizations often, like thrive or die based
mhm,
off communication. It is
that's
so
it.
important in every
It
single
is.
industry. And so, yeah, no, it really is huge. But I'm wondering, are you seeing, are there like any like new like, trends
Mm,
or technologies that you're seeing within the organization, communication industry, consulting space, anything like that that's just changing the game for some companies or organizations?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, when you've been in it as long as I have, you start to see some historical trends and things that go away. I think there are a couple things that jump out to me. First of all, leaders are starting to see communication as not just a soft skill. You've heard it referred to, oh, we need to develop soft skills. It's the marshmallow that we need to make sure every now and then we align our employees to. But actually, folks are starting to recognize communication as an operational competency. It's that clarity, alignment, messaging are strategic assets. They're not personality traits anymore. So that is something I think that's one shift. The next has to do with AI, and I think it's reshaping how organizations communicate, both internally and externally. And it helps us analyze sentiment. It helps us streamline our messaging. It helps us prepare for high stake conversations. All of those things AI can help it. But here's the paradox: the more technology we adopt, the more human communication matters.
Right.
AI can accelerate clarity, but it cannot replace trust,
Yeah.
presence, or relational, or sometimes you hear it called emotional intelligence. And I think
Yeah.
leaders who understand that balance are the ones that are going to thrive into the future.
Yeah, that is so important. It really is. It is very I love how you brought up that point because it is so important, right? People, I feel like when especially when we get into the talk about like AI, right, and technology in general, but like people are so afraid that it's gonna like replace so many jobs, there's gonna be so many people out of work, right? But like I feel like you said, like people still want to connect with people. People trust people, right? People don't
That's
necessarily
right.
trust robots, people don't want to connect with robots, right? And so it's there's
Mm,
that part of it where it's like that's never going away. People are
that's right.
always going to want to connect with people. And it's
Mm,
and it yeah, it and so I totally agree with you. I think
mm.
it can definitely be used for lots of to help accelerate things, to help add clarity like you said, but you definitely still need to use it in the right way because it won't replace everything.
That's right.
And
Well,
so,
and again, I've
yeah,
been at this long enough to see, like in the '80s, it was personal computing, and suddenly, oh, we're going to replace all these jobs, and printers are going out of business, and then in the mid '90s, the internet came, and it was going to change everything. And I think we're at this point where there's another revolution, and
yeah,
I'm okay with that because we kind of go through a process of evolution and then periodically revolution. We kind of update everything, and every time it's we've gone through a revolution, people are crying, "The sky's falling, the sky's falling," and it may not be. We get on the other side of it, and we're like, "Hey, you know what? This is really good. This is really helping me do my job better." So I'm not as intimidated by it as maybe some people are.
yeah, yeah. No, totally, totally. I would have to agree with you. It is
Mm,
very interesting season that we're going into,
yeah.
and just business in general with this the AI and
Mm,
technology. But I'm
mm,
wondering, to shift a little bit, on the business side of things, what's working
yeah.
really well at Paradox right now?
Well, I think what I'm finding is that the communication audit process, sometimes that word audit scares people. The communication assessment, the enterprise wide assessment is resonating with leaders. They are liking the idea of a clear research based diagnostic that shows exactly where the alignment is breaking down. I sometimes compare it to like when you go to the doctor and they say we need to do some more tests. So they send you in for an MRI or a CAT scan. It does a full scan body, a full scale body scan, and then it will determine what areas need addressing. So again, back to
Yeah.
the doctor metaphor, I think that's what the audit process does.
Mm,
Second, I think a lot of the leaders out there, and me too, are relying on referrals. Most of
mm,
my work comes from leaders who've experienced that audit and the transformational period firsthand, and they want their colleagues in other places to get it as well. So that kind of organic growth tells me that the work is landing in a meaningful way. So
Yeah.
I'm appreciative of it, but also don't want to rely on it as like, oh well, it's always going to be on referrals. I'm always looking for ways to expand.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And that's awesome to hear just how it is going well and
Mm.
it's
Yeah.
thriving and you said that natural growth. That's awesome.
Yes.
Every business faces challenges. I'm wondering if maybe you can share a challenge either you're facing right now or maybe a past challenge that you've been
Mm.
able to overcome,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
anything like that.
Well, this one is very timely because just recently I kind of went through this existential crisis, wondering if what I was offering was way too broad. And
Mm,
because I like the audit, I like fractional work, I like all of these things, and I finally came to a realization that I'm here to help organizations diagnose and resolve communication tension points.
mm,
That really is my very singular focus. And then I have this breadth of diagnostic tools in my toolbox and tested solutions too that I can help organizations use to reduce those tension points. So I was viewing the breadth of my methodology as a possible negative. And in reality, it's really what gives my consulting credibility and clarity. So I finally had to come and go, you know what? You can't allow your methodology to get out ahead of your goal of helping organizations. So I kind of, some people come at this very differently, Chris, but for me, it was like, okay, I've got better clarity now of what I'm doing and what I can bring to the organizational setting.
yeah, no, and that is huge, right? It really is so big, right? To have
Mhm.
that to get to that place, right? Where
Yeah,
where it's a
yeah,
lot more specific and offering, and it's so that's awesome to hear. That really is.
yeah.
When you look ahead like
Mhm.
6 months to a year from now, like what is like a goal that you're focused on achieving with Paradox and like
Yeah.
what does that look like?
I'm really intrigued now by the fractional model of work. So I went
Mm,
to seminar recently with my son, and it was a chief financial officer, and he offered fractional CFO work. And
mm,
I left that meeting going, you know what, this is something that could work in a communication setting as well. So what I'd like to do is
mm,
expand the fractional communication leadership model. And they're needing companies are needing some ongoing communication expertise, not just a
yeah,
one-time engagement. So my goal is to maybe build a small portfolio of long-term advisory kind of relationships where I serve as a fractional communication leader. And this is something that's relatively new in our field, but I think it will help organizations align better as they want to grow.
yeah. No, that is it is there a couple points you said, right? The fractional work is just getting like more and more popular. I'm
Yeah,
seeing it
it really
pop up
is.
more and more in
That's right.
plenty of different ways. And especially like with communication, that is huge. And that is such a amazing way that you can fractionally come and help a company just help and because like you said, like it's not like a quick fix, right? When you
No,
when you have these like big things like communication that are like built into a culture in like
mhm,
a negative way, if communication's not good, it's a hard thing to
that's right.
transition, especially some of these organizations, they've been doing it the same way probably the entire time they've been an
Mhm,
organization. So
mhm,
it's years that you're trying to, make this shift and this change, and
that's
it
right.
makes it difficult, right? And that stuff does
Yeah,
take time. And so, yeah, that is exciting that is a venture that you are pursuing, to reach that, like,
yeah,
you said you mentioned trying to get a couple of organizations in your portfolio. Is there like to reach that like growth, like what's the plan? Like are you planning on like trying to make new investments or new strategies or tools or staff, or what's the plan to reach that?
One of the things is I want to keep building my toolbox of repeatable diagnostic methodologies. And one of the things that I'm doing right now is working on a standardized instrument that I can use going into organizations. And I'm partnering with Professor Cal Downs, who's retired professor emeritus at the University of Kansas, and I am helping him rewrite his book on assessing organizational communication. And in that, he has a wonderful tool that looks at communication from a satisfaction standpoint. So I'm working on refining that tool somewhat so that I can offer that to organizations. I'm also looking, and I talked about this earlier, maybe leveraging some AI tools to streamline the analysis. I've actually dumped into AI um, interviews and things like that to have it content analyze. And I'm finding that it's a very good tool. Haven't quite figured out how I can get it to crunch statistical numbers. Although earlier today I put in, I was like, are can you do inferential and descriptive stats? And AI was like, yeah, sure, just put in the data. I haven't quite jumped into that yet, but I think there's something to be learned from there. And then just
Yeah.
exploring partnerships. I think that's what I'm looking for. And I'm doing several speaking engagements, podcasts, things like that, in the hopes of finding some strategic partnerships to help grow that fractional part of
Yeah.
communication.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, really cool. Yeah, it is so interesting to see how you could just have this idea, bring it to AI
Mhm.
and have it kind of piece it apart. But
Yeah,
it's really cool that you're, expanding and opening up, and that's super exciting. Are there
yeah.
like any specific challenges you're facing to,
Mm.
get started with that, or
Yeah.
that you've been facing reaching that growth?
I think one of the main challenges that I'm finding is how to balance customization and scalability. So every organization's unique. And so my
Mm,
work is
yeah.
very much tailored to the organization. So in order to grow, I need systems that kind of preserve that customization while reducing the manual load. So it's more, and I think I'm going to have to hire additional people to help with the administrative work so that I can stay focused on the client. And I think another one is visibility. I've always kind of used, it's an old communication theory that said that which holds attention persuades. So I need to grab the attention of leaders out there and help them realize that communication is the root cause of many of their problems. So, and then helping them see that, and then also understanding that there is a return on your investment when you invest in communication work. I think that's essential for our next tier of clients that we're going to get at Paradox.
Yeah. No, that is very, very interesting because yeah, it's one of those things where it's sometimes when you initially think about, communication gets better, how does that actually affect return on investment? Right. At first, you may think like, it may not,
Mhm,
right? But if you
mhm,
really dig into it, right, it affects every part of the business, which it is
does.
going to affect return on investment. And so yeah, that
Absolutely.
really is
Yeah,
interesting.
that's a great thought.
Um,
Yes.
yeah, no, it's so interesting. I feel like what you've been able to add has been so awesome. I feel like it's brought up such important parts with, communicating, but especially as like you're tackling, all these different
Mhm,
angles of like navigating your business. And so it's been super,
mhm.
super interesting. Thank you for just sharing. Before we
Sure.
go, I'd love to give you a chance to share with our listeners where they can, find Paradox, where they can
Mhm.
find you, where they can keep up with what you have going on.
Yeah, absolutely. We're on the internet. It's theparadoxway.com. And you can learn more about the communication audit or fractional work that we do. and some upcoming resources that we share there. Also, we're very active on LinkedIn, and I share insights there, videos on leadership and communication. Just search for Paradox Communication Consulting there and follow us on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Awesome. Before we close, I'd like to ask one last question. Since this
Yeah.
is the Business Leaders Legacy podcast, and you being a business leader and the owner of Paradox Communication Consulting, what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind?
I think it's pretty simple. For me, I want to be remembered as someone who successfully juggled three main areas in my life. I used to demonstrate this to my students in my classes, and I would bring in three tennis balls. And I would have someone in the class who knew how to juggle. So I would ask him or her to come up to the front and demonstrate for everyone. So they would take the three tennis balls and they were juggling, and eventually they would drop one and they would pick it back up and start juggling again. That was the key lesson. I told them, I said, those three tennis balls represent three areas of your life. First of all, your identity, or in my case, as a faith based person, my testimony. So that was one of the balls that's up in the air. The second one was my relationship with others. And then the third was my task. And all three of those balls have to be in the air at any given time. And I usually told them, I said, you know, of people who are so task oriented that they do so at the expense of their relationships, or someone who's so interested in relationships that they drop their tasks. And I said, it's about juggling all three, and it's okay if you drop one of the balls. You need to pick
Yeah.
it up and start juggling it again. So that's really what I want to be remembered for, was someone who maintained a sense of balance and did his best to keep those three balls in the air.
Yeah, that is awesome. That really is really cool illustration, and I feel like it just makes sense.
Yeah.
And so thank you, Darren. I really appreciate it. To all of our listeners out there, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed our conversation, please share, subscribe, like, follow, all that stuff, and please go check out what Darren has going on. Is some awesome stuff. And so thank you again, and we will see you guys next time. Thank you, Darren.
Chris.